I'm Alexa from the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo, and this is Danny.
Hi, I'm here. I didn't know I was in on this. Woohoo!
We are recording live at the Calgary Comics and Entertainment Expo. We're here. There's some Scooby people here, and we're gonna go chat with them. Welcome to a long-awaited new episode of the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo, the podcast where we delve into the mystery of Scooby-Doo media, getting clues from people who helped bring our favorite mystery-solving dog to life on various platforms, and maybe eating some Scooby snacks along the way. I'm your host, Alexa Lawler.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
And it would have been mine if it hadn't been to those meddling kids.
Gang, we've just been handed our next mystery.
Blasted meddling kids.
If you're a long-time listener, thank you for waiting on the severe delays in between episodes of this podcast. I had the pleasure of attending the 2024 Calgary Comics and Entertainment Expo and was able to do a few interviews for this podcast while I was there. I'm thrilled to finally be sharing these with you. Doing these interviews really reminded me of why I wanted to do the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo in the first place, and I'm so excited for you to finally hear them. As you heard in the intro, all of these interviews were done live on location in Calgary, so you'll likely hear some crowd noise in the background. Before we dive in, I had the pleasure of interviewing 3 people at the event. First, we have Tim Sheridan, writer on Scooby-Doo Curse of the 13th Ghost and Scooby-Doo and the Gourmet Ghost. Then, we have John Delaney, who worked on a handful of Scooby-Doo comics from DC. And finally, not to bury the lead, but I was able to quickly speak with Grey Delisle for a few minutes on the last day of the convention before she headed off to the airport. Of course, she truly needs no introduction, but if you're not familiar, Grey is, of course, the voice of Daphne Blake. I won't be introducing these guests again as the episode goes on, so keep an ear out for the musical interludes noting the breaks between these interviews. Like this one, leading us into our first interview. Tell me how you first got involved with writing for Scooby.
I mean, I was very lucky. My first job writing professionally in television was for a show that Warner Brothers was making, Warner Brothers Animation. It was called Justice League Action, so it was a DC Comics show. And I wrote several episodes of this show. It was going really well. I was making friends with and forging relationships with new colleagues at Warner Animation. And one of them was a guy who was one of my mentors, Alan Burnett. He's a legend in the world of animation. Well, Alan had overseen a lot of Scooby-Doo projects, and the development executive at Warner's, named Jay Bastian, came to Alan and he said, "Hey, we're talking about doing a movie with Food Network stars. Do you know anything about Food Network?" And Alan said, "I really don't." But by strange coincidence, I had just been in Alan's office the day before talking about how obsessed I am with food television. And Alan said, "You know who you might want to talk to is Tim Sheridan." And they knew me from that Justice League show. So they called me in and they tested me. They say, like, "Do you know about Scooby-Doo?" Of course I know about Scooby-Doo. I grew up, like many of us, loving Scooby-Doo and never dreaming that I would get to write Scooby-Doo. And they said, "What do you know about Food Network?" And I was like, "Well, I proved my bona fides there easily." And they said, let's talk about doing a movie. And it became Scooby-Doo and the Gourmet Ghost, which featured Bobby Flay from Food Network and Giada De Laurentiis, famous celebrity chefs, Marcus Samuelsson, and we had a lot of fun. And so it was a great, fun process. I found that a lifetime of being a Scooby-Doo fan had put those voices in my head in a way that the writing of it was a joy. And I don't want to say it's easy, but when you love and know characters that have been around for so long and they're part of your DNA, it does make the process a little bit easier. And so we had a great time.
And how does that transfer to writing for those Food Network stars as well? Was that easy to get those voices in?
Well, what was easy about it was that it was all centered around food. And as you know, Shaggy and Scooby have a lot to say about food. In fact, what was hysterical was the biggest note I got from Warner Brothers throughout the process of the drafts of the script was, you got to give more food dialogue to Shaggy and Scooby. They're living, this is their wish fulfillment. They're living their dream right now. So start really just playing up the kinds of amazing dishes that they're able to get that they couldn't get normally when they're on the road solving mysteries. And so it was fun. And I talked to Bobby Flay, about kind of the kinds of things that he would make and the kinds of things that he wanted to showcase, what we could put into the movie that Shaggy and Scooby might like. So I found that was pretty easy. They were really easy to work with, those folks. They love Scooby-Doo too. So they also Bobby really wanted his cat, Nacho Flay, to be in the movie. And so I was like, absolutely. I'm a cat person. I'm like, let's do it. So Nacho became a character. But then once Giada De Laurentiis heard that Nacho was going to be in the movie, she said, well, what about my cat, Bella? I want her to be in the movie. I said, absolutely. So we did a new draft and we put Bella in the movie as well. So I think they felt like, we got their voices right. And the great thing is, they're the ones doing the voices. So if a line didn't feel right to them, they could tell us. But, we didn't, they seemed to think that we got it right. So.
Did you ever hear anything back from them once the movie was out, or?
Oh yeah, I mean not directly, but they were very, as I understand it, they were very excited, very happy about it. They I think Giada tweeted about it and was very excited about it. I think here's what I think. I've never talked to them directly about it since then, but I think they were just thrilled that Nacho and Bella got a movie. I think that was their big claim to fame. I think that was it.
Moving to the Curse of the 13th Ghost, how did that one come about?
So I had done that Gourmet Ghost movie. Jim Krieg, who had hired me on the Justice League show and I'd worked with on some other DC projects, was producing some, new Scooby-Doo animated movies. And Jay Bastian had this idea for what they were calling a Scooby-Doo trilogy, and where we would, in the first two movies, would go back and revisit Zombie Island and 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. And they called me in so I could pitch on the movies. They said, what do you... And I didn't grow up on Zombie Island. I'm a little older than that. And Zombie Island was a touchstone for so many kids, and it was such an important milestone in the canon of Scooby-Doo. And I'd seen it, but it wasn't my first Scooby-Doo experience. So, but 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo was the Scooby-Doo show, the new one that was on when I was a kid. I remember watching the Friday night, they would do a preview of what the new cartoons were going to be on Saturday morning. And I remember watching that preview for 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, and I was like, this is going to be amazing. So, and I watched all the episodes. So I sat in the room and I said, I informed them, because Warner Brothers didn't seem to know this. I said, that show ended after a season, and they never caught the 13th ghost. And they said, what? I said, I mean, if you look at it, technically, they still would have had a ghost, at least one ghost, to capture. So, and to put back in the chest of demons. And they said, well, that's the movie, isn't it? I said, that's literally my pitch. Let's go. And then it became a question of, how should we do, with not having Vincent Price available anymore? Should we have, Vincent Van Gogh in the movie? And knowing Maurice LaMarche can do an incredible killer Vincent Price, that became an easy solve once he was willing to do it. And then the big thing was, I said, look, I really want to have Flim Flam and Scrappy-Doo in here as well. But, they said, okay, I pitched them on what I wanted to do with Flim Flam, and they said, yeah, let's do it. But Scrappy, they didn't go for. So, unfortunately. But at least we got to see grown-up Flim Flam, who was overdue for a growth spurt.
And what was your pitch for Scrappy?
Well, I don't know. Have I talked about it publicly? I don't know. It was going to be, it came down, I'll tell you, it came down to a cameo, and it, a little bit more than a cameo, but but it would have been a really exciting one. It was in the big climactic fight, the big climactic chase. Flim Flam and everybody else are cornered by Asmodeus, and then there's a noise, and in the doorway there's the shadow of a hulking, enormous Great Dane, and you just hear in a low, growly voice, "Let me at him." Because I think Scrappy was overdue for a growth spurt too.
Was there ever any discussion into adding like Bogle and Weird back into that movie?
Actually, they're in the script in just a brief cameo. It was difficult because part of the mandate was we want to. Some of the people above me in the food chain and the production wanted to explain away the ghosts as not being ghosts, which was very classic Scooby-Doo. Where are you? And like they did that with Zombie Island, Return to Zombie Island, and I felt like I said, look, can we at least just make it ambiguous? Like, we don't know, were they real or were they not real? Like, I would rather leave it up to viewers, because I think everybody's got a really differing opinion on it, and I don't think one of them has to be right. It's kind of what you believe. It's honestly the way we deal with ghosts in real life. Some people believe in ghosts, and some people don't. So that's what I want to do, and I think that's what we tried to achieve. That's what they said, yes, go ahead, do that, and so that's what we tried to achieve. Now that made Bogle and Weird, is Bogle and Weird, right? Yeah, it made that a little bit more complicated. So in the temple, in the script, they're in one moment there's I think it's Shaggy and Scooby. They're standing and they're in front of a giant portrait of these two monks from a long time ago who look suspiciously like Bogle and Weird. And it was that was all I pitched, was let's just say that those were real. These were monks that had been part of this, temple, and perhaps their spirits haunt this place, and maybe they're going to be, that explains their presence in 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. But they ended up not putting it in the movie. But that happened after I left. It was in the script, but it didn't make it into the movie. So.
And were you given like a rationale as to why no paranormal anything? Was it mostly just to like keep it classic Scooby?
I think it came down to there were the personal tastes of the stakeholders, the people at Warner Brothers who run the thing, and it's their property and it's their prerogative how they want to present that stuff. So it's I think it was they just had a personal feeling that Scooby-Doo, at its best is like the very original series where it was somebody in a mask and with a projector and running a real estate scam, and I think that probably if you asked them today, I bet they would probably say, that is certainly an era of Scooby-Doo, but you can't deny the fact that there are generations of fans who grew up with the paranormal being real in Scooby-Doo, and those people want to see shows that reflect the kind of Scooby they like. So I just think there's room for everybody. As long as there's more Scooby-Doo stuff coming, I'm happy. I may never be happier in writing than when I'm writing Scooby-Doo. it is the most fun I have as a writer, and I wouldn't give it up for anything. I did an R-rated Batman animated movie, and when it was coming out, the producer of the movie said, "I don't want you to write Scooby-Doo movies anymore because it's going to be weird for people to like think of you as writing a movie that's for the whole family versus an R-rated dark Batman movie." And I thought, there's no way I'm not going to write Scooby-Doo anymore. So I kind of compromised a little bit. I've written some Scooby-Doo stuff under a pseudonym. So so then maybe there'll be more of that coming down in the future.
Why do you think that Scooby-Doo has persevered for so long and for over 50 years now?
It's the characters. They are like our friends. We've been riding around in the Mystery Machine with them for decades and decades, and they haven't. Usually they don't change. Usually they pretty much stay the same archetypes. In some ways they've grown a little bit. Like I really felt it was important to expand Daphne's role in Curse of the 13th Ghost and really put a fine point on how she was kind of the leader in the show, 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. And I wanted to show that side of her. And I think it's, we can add more dimensions. That doesn't change the character. Typically, though, we know who they are in their core, and they're familiar, and they're our friends, and we'll always come back to them. I think, as long as we're around.
And just lastly, with the Curse of the 13th Ghost, there has been some mixed feelings and a little bit of controversy about it. Are you happy with how the movie turned out? And if you had any choice to change anything without any executive interference, would you?
Well, I wouldn't call it interference. I mean, I think that they make the products that they want to make. I mean, these are their things. I'm just a steward. I'm a writer who comes in and tries to help realize their vision and what they want to do. But I love the movie wildly. I think it's got a lot of fun in it. There are tons of, I like the jokes, but I wrote them, so I don't know. And I like that there is, more than anything, that we got to see Flim Flam having, a future. We even leave him on a kind of an emotional note, and where you're giving his classic, his classic line, calling them sports fans. It's for me, it was a labor of love, and I look at that movie and all I see is the love that I have, not only for Scooby-Doo, but for 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. And I wouldn't change anything except maybe I would put that portrait back on the wall. And I would really like to see that Scrappy cameo, just even if it's just a cameo. I mean, I'd love him to be even more involved, but I think it'll happen. I think someday we'll see it.
I think that covers all of the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else you wanted to add at all, or anything you wanted to promote?
No, I hope people, know that these movies and shows are made by people who absolutely love Scooby-Doo. And we all love Scooby-Doo from different angles and different places in our life. Some people who love Scooby-Doo have been around watching it from the original show, and they have different opinions about it. Some people started with Zombie Island. Some people started just recently. But we're the people who make these things are people who really love them. And as long as there's more Scooby-Doo, I hope people keep watching.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
To start off, how did you first get involved with working on the Scooby-Doo comics?
I was doing Adventures in the DC Universe for DC, and DC owns the rights to all the Cartoon Network programs. So when that comic got canceled, they reached out to me and said, would you like to draw Scooby-Doo? I'm a huge Scooby-Doo fan, so I said, absolutely. So I jumped right on board.
So you mentioned you were a Scooby-Doo fan. What was your favorite show growing up?
I love the one where they teamed up with Batman. I was a big Batman fan and, of course, Scooby fan. So to me, that was the ultimate culmination of two things. So, yeah, that one.
for people that are listening that maybe don't know, what is the role that you were in working on the comics?
So I'm the penciler, so I draw the comic. Traditionally, comics are written by a different writer, and sometimes it's a writer and penciler, but in this particular case it was written for me. Script is sent to me, I break it down and figure out where all the angles are and where all the panels are going to be, and lay it all out and draw it, and then it's handed over to an inker who fills in the black line work, just to tighten it up so it can be photographed properly, and then colored and lettered, and away we go. So I'm the guy who draws it.
When you're given a script, is it written out like panels and you just kind of work it into the drawings, or how does that work?
It's a bit like if a scriptwriter hands something to a director, like you read the script and then you start to plan out the shots you want, the angles, why you want to do certain things. The script will be broken into panels, certainly, because the writer wants to know, well, this panel says this and this panel says that, but he doesn't tell you what angles to use or, how you want to place the characters. So I can place the characters 3 people in a row, or I can have Shaggy up front, Scooby in the background, give a little depth. So that's sort of the decision making of the artist. So yeah, my job is to take a script and basically direct it into film.
And with something like Scooby that has kind of a particular look, were you given like model sheets and things to work off?
Oh yeah, they're very, there's 2 schools of thought on that sort of thing, especially, since I'd come off of things like Justice League Adventures and that. I know the fans want it to look exactly like how they saw it on TV, and I'm aware of that. So I don't put any of my own personal pride into it. My personal pride comes into making it look as close as possible to the comics. Where you have real fun with things is doing characters in the background, or some of the various different. I did one where they were at a psychic fair in England, so I took a whole bunch of reference from where the Piccadilly Circus looked, and I built that all around it, and so put the characters. So those are really fun things. But yeah, you really want the characters to look on model and look exactly like what people want to see. Otherwise, it's disappointing when you open it. I know it was for me when I'd open up a comic book and go, well, it doesn't really look like those characters, So to me, a real point of pride is that they look like the characters, they act like the characters when they do a take. When Scooby goes, I know what that face looks like, so I want to draw it.
And what is the timeline like? Were you working on like one comic at a time?
You have normally, traditionally in comics, you have about 6 weeks to pencil out an entire 22 pages. With Scooby-Doo, the turnover was pretty tight. Usually I'd have maybe 4 weeks. But again, because I'd worked in animation for as long as I did, I really knew those characters. I knew how they worked in shapes and how they were broken down into those kind of proportions and that. So that wasn't really challenging for me. I jumped into it pretty quickly and it felt very easy.
Who is your favorite character of the gang to draw?
Velma.
Why is that?
I just think she's cool. She's a great character. She's the one who's always thinking. So when you're drawing her, you can draw somebody thinking by putting a finger to their chin, and that's obvious, right? So I always try to find different ways of Velma thinking. Like sometimes she'd be, crossing her arms and putting her hand on a thing. Sometimes she'd be, tilting the head. In the animated series, there's only so much you can kind of do because you're moving along to the next thing. A comic, you can sit and stare at a panel. So I really always wanted her to have that sort of sense that she's just a little bit more highbrow than the rest of them. Freddy's fearless, Shaggy's impulsive and libidinous and needs food and all that sort of thing. Daphne is intelligent but more street savvy, whereas Velma is completely, academic, and I really liked showing that.
And why do you think that Scooby-Doo has persevered for over 50 years now?
I think it's a very relatable idea. I think everybody, when they're a teenager in high school, is plagued with doubt, but also sort of feels like you're just coming into your own with perception and how things are. I think we all love monsters, and the idea that behind every monster is probably a more monstrous person. I would have got away with it too if it wasn't for you kids, And I always loved that. So I think it's such a universal thing that Scooby-Doo. So what I learned very early on in animation is that if you want to do a show that will attract 13 or 14-year-olds, and that you do a show about 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds. If you want to do a show that will attract 5-year-olds, you do a show about 10-year-olds. So Scooby-Doo has a very niche market, and then it jumps in again to nostalgia. So first the niche market is young teens. They're just sort of coming to their own. They're looking to a little bit older teens. They're driving a van. So they're just leaving high school, right? And then when you get into college, you get a little bit older. You look back at that and go, well, that's a fondness. I love that, right? So Scooby-Doo appeals to multiple generations, but the introduction of Scooby-Doo is always the same. It's right at that age when you're starting to get that age where you're going, oh, those older kids are so cool. Hey, look, these ones drive a van and they solve mysteries. It's cool, right?
I think that covers all of the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add at all or anything you want to promote?
Well, as far as promotion, I've been very fortunate in my career. I've got a lot out there, so if you want to just follow me on Instagram, John Delaney 40, and I'm always doing a lot of cons now, and I'm working on a couple different projects right now, just some stuff for DC and that. So that's great. But more with Scooby-Doo, I just want to say that the reason that I think Scooby-Doo is so freaking cool is it's a dog that sort of communicates. And when we talk to our dogs and that, we go like, "Hey boy," and they go, "Rrr?" I go, "Did you say John?" And I love that. I love that he never really he says a little bit, but it's more like "Rrr?" And you're going, that could be a dog. A dog could do things like that, And I think that's really what makes him so great. So many other animal shows, like Brian and Family Guy, they actually speak. And Scooby doesn't. He's a dog, and he's always a dog. He's very close to Shaggy. They grew up together. Love the old Scoob movie, like that. And I really love that connection because when you have an animal and you're really close to that animal, you talk to it like that, like, "Who's a good boy?" And I think that they really nailed it there. Hanna-Barbera, most of their stuff is just genius. The designs are fantastic too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey guys, cheers.
First of all, I wanted to ask you, when you took on the role of Daphne, did you ever think that you would be kind of synonymous with that role?
Gosh, it was a really bittersweet time, mostly bitter, because I had lost my really good friend, Mary Kay Bergman, who had originated the role. She didn't originate it, but she was the third Daphne. And so it was kind of a heartbreaking time, but now I'm so glad that I took the role over because I feel her with me all the time now. And I really thought I'd maybe do one season or something and they'd find another one, but it's been 24 years and I'm still doing it, so that's kind of amazing to me because when I was little I would come home from school and put on my robe and eat ice cream and watch Scooby-Doo, and if somebody had said, "You're going to be Daphne someday," I would have never believed them. So
How close is Daphne to your own voice? Do you have to do too much to dip into her?
It's very close. I mean, sometimes I put the voice on and I'm like, well, jeepers, it's, Daphne's a little bit more up here, and, it's so creepy, the mystery. So it's just a little bit, but my voice is just a little bit deeper, and I brought all my snark to the character, too. That's all, weaseled its way in after the years. She started out very nice, because Mary Kay was very, very nice, and I'm not as nice as she is.
So for each new iteration, movie, series, do you try to bring something a little bit fresh?
Kind of gotten cozy with it now. She's kind of staying, close to how I sort of molded her. So yeah, I just kind of pretty much am keeping it steady now. But we'll see. Somebody might make me angry.
Of course. And why do you think that Scooby has persevered for so long?
Gosh, I think people love that it always has the same resolution, and I think there's that just the ritual of it, and also I know some people that have some sensory processing problems, or just have a little bit neurodivergent minds. They don't like surprises, and they don't like to be too scared, and my son even, he really likes the fact that it never gets too scary, and that it always ends up being okay in the end. So yeah.
Awesome. I think that covers all of the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add at all? Anything to promote or anything?
Follow me on Spotify, because I write country music and I put it out almost every week on Spotify. So I would love people to follow me and listen to my music.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
So much. All right. Take care.
And that concludes today's episode. Another huge thank you to everyone at the Calgary Comics and Entertainment Expo and all of my interview guests for taking the time to chat with me. Also, a special shout out to Danny Meager, who you heard from in the introduction to this episode, for running around the Calgary Comics and Entertainment Expo with me and causing Scooby-Doo shenanigans. I believe you can follow her on all social channels at World Record Collector, and you should absolutely check out her YouTube channel. For more Scooby content, be sure to check at Unmasked SD Podcast on Instagram or on TikTok at Unmasked SD. You can also find the podcast at unmaskedsdpodcast.com. If you like this episode and want to hear more, also make sure to check those social media channels or the website. Or you can listen to older episodes wherever you like to get your podcast fix. Thanks for listening, and keep an ear out for the next episode. Scooby-Doo!